Now, we've distinguished finite and non-finite verbs. We now look at lexical and auxiliary verbs. These are all refinements of the same message. The message is the child threw the ball. Now these things can be said in many different ways. In this case, threw or throw or throwing, these are all lexical verbs here. All of these here are what are called auxiliary verbs. They help you to change the nuance of what you're saying. This indicates that it's some kind of fact that the child threw the ball. This indicates that you see it in a different manner. You talk about something which has happened in the past, but you talk about a progressive aspect in the past. Here you talk about also something progressive, but it is nearer related to now time. And here, because you have the addition of this word may, it shows that you're unsure about this. So, what is the meaning of, say, for example, been and was? Well, they have no meaning in themselves. They only have what is known as grammatical meaning. So if we look at this again, we have different kinds of help verbs. And auxiliary verbs help the speaker to indicate how or when or in which way they see the lexical event. So all of these verbs here, the auxiliary verbs, they help the speakers to see how or when or in which way the lexical event took place. If we look at this one more time, then we make the following distinction. All of these are lexical verbs. All of these are auxiliary verbs, but this one is a modal verb. If we move on to look at the act of communication, so what happens is, if there's some aspect of reality, and that in that reality a window is broke or has broken, then how do we then put this into words? Well, we have the speaker's pre-knowledge. The speaker knows that there's a window, it was whole, and that the status of that window has changed. And this is how the speaker might interpret the window being broken. There might be the factuality. That's a lexical verb. For example, you might say, the window broke, or she broke the window. If you add what are called temporal and aspectual features, then you might say, the window had broken, or she had broken the window. She is breaking the window. It shows some kind of temporal feature. It indicates how the speaker looks upon it. And then you have the modal auxiliary, and the modal auxiliary verb indicates how sure are you of this event. So this is the modal auxiliary verb, and these are the primary or the helping auxiliary verbs, and these here are the lexical verbs. So in the act of, and then the listener's pre-knowledge will help the listener to understand how you as a speaker interpret this reality. So in the act of communication, you have factuality here, and mood, and in the middle you have the temporal aspects. And these temporal and aspectual features are using the primary auxiliary verbs, and there are three of them: has, be, and do. And they allow the speaker to interpret the event, to show whether an action, for example, is complete or incomplete. And in all of these cases here, you have these show aspect, and then They are also used for making of questions, saying something in the negative, or using the passive form. To make a question, you'd say, has she opened the door? So in the declarative it would be she has opened the door, but to make the question, the primary auxiliary is moved to an initial position. So that, for example, is making questions. We'll leave the other forms for now. Moving on to communicating mood. And for mood, you need auxiliary verbs, and there are a handful of them. These are the auxiliary verbs. And modal auxiliary verbs allow the speaker to interpret a personal interpretation of the, so it gives a personal interpretation of this and this. And by introducing a modal auxiliary verb, what the speaker can do is they might show necessity, you have to go, possibility, you could go, permission, you may go, obligation, you should go. So by using these, you indicate something different to your speakers. And it's important for you to remember that modal verbs are always finite. But unlike the other verbs, they do not change for person, number, and tense. That should be a B there. For person, number, and tense. Well, that brings us to the end of this.